with the lifestyle, it's the same. So I'm a rent investor myself, but I actually live for free. So it's a pretty unique thing I do. I actually live in one of my own apartments. I've rented out a couple of the rooms and I live for free. And then the same thing, mate. I've got, a boat on the harbour that I own with another guy and a share in that. I fly first and business class for free. You have to live at the same time. A lot of people, want to push you just to, save, invest, and then obviously live when you retire. But there's a lot of people that don't make it to retirement. So I think it's about finding the happy medium of enjoying lifestyle, but also being quite strict on the investing side as well.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how on where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You'll hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested. Hi freedom fighters, what are your freedom numbers? Now I can hear the stunned silence, the crickets and the tumbleweed. And your mind's going, Bushy, what the hell are you talking about? What's that got to do with anything? Well, let's break it down a little. What's your ideal lifestyle? How much does that lifestyle cost per year? And how many years before you want to be in that position without you trading your time for money to fund it, or in other words, having to work 5 to 7 days a week to fund that lifestyle? And this then all breaks down into the 4 key freedom numbers. Because if we know our ideal lifestyle income number and our break-free timeline number in years, then it's really easy for us to work out your income-producing nest egg number that you'll need to fund this. And then all we do is just work backwards to determine your freedom number today. Or in other words, the number of high-growth properties or the amount of investment savings that you need to acquire today that will grow and fund your lifestyle so that you can stop work when you want to or not need to work in the future. So when someone comes to us to talk about investing in property, these are the first questions that we ask, because if you're not clear on where you're heading, where you are now, and how you're going to bridge the gap, there's no point even talking about property, because you won't be clear about what property strategy you need to adopt to achieve your goals, you won't have a roadmap to keep you on track, and you're very unlikely to last a distance. Now, it's critically important to your success to get clear on your freedom numbers first. And if you haven't had a chance to read my book, The Freedom Formula, which gives you the step-by-step guide to determine your freedom numbers as the very starting point of your property investment strategy, then you're really going to enjoy today's episode, where we go through this live on air with our guest, Jack Henderson. And Jack's a shining example of a young gun who just gets it and is really making it happen. Jack's a 20-something who was expelled from school and has worked and saved hard to secure a property portfolio of over $3 million and growing. And he's on track to secure and grow his property portfolio to $5 million by the time he's 28, and plans to create a $10 million property asset base by the time he's 40. And there's no reason why he won't achieve all this. And while Jack works hard, saves hard, and invests well, it doesn't restrict his lifestyle, as he loves living his dream on luxury boats on Sydney Harbour. And like myself, Jack's a contrarian who goes against the grain of conventional thinking so that he lives well and also invests well. So how's he doing it? And how can you learn from and follow his example? Well, there's a really easy way to find out. Just sit back and enjoy this very open, informative an energising chat with Jack Henderson. Hi, Freedom Fighters. Now, over the last 35 years, I've had the pleasure of rubbing shoulders with a lot of very successful people. And the traits that are common amongst all of them are not what you'd traditionally expect. It's not education, it's not how smart you are, or how many degrees that you've got in your back pocket. In fact, these are often disadvantages. And surprisingly, the two most common traits are fearlessness and a limitless attitude. And today's guest embodies these in absolute spades. So welcome aboard to Get Invested, Jack Henderson.
Mate, thanks very much for having me on.
Mate, really looking forward to diving in deep with you today, mate. Very impressed with what you've achieved so far and very keen for you to share that with the audience, mate. So, look, for those that haven't heard you on some of the other appearances, mate, can you give us a rundown on who you are and what you do, mate, please?
So, mate, I guess my 30-second story would be I grew up in northwestern Sydney in a working-class family, and then I was successfully expelled from two schools, the last one at 15 years old, and was sort of forced to get a job. So the job that was available at the time was with my father in the construction industry. So I left school, went and worked with Dad, and I sort of thought to myself, I've backed myself into a corner here. I've got no formal education. I'm working in a sort of a dead-end job. I need to do something with myself or my money. So I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. Obviously, people's perception of you when you get expelled from two schools isn't the greatest. They sort of think you are going to be a dead shit in a way. So I started educating myself around the subject of money and investing. And I guess property come into the equation because there's a stigma in Australia where, everyone should buy their own home, whether it's an investment or just your own, castle. Everyone buys their own home. So I went down the property path, was educating myself from sort of 15 when I got expelled until 18, until I purchased my first. And then it's just been a ride from there. So I purchased my first at 18, second at 20, third at 21, and then I'm just about to purchase my fourth at 22, 23.
Awesome, mate. Awesome. Great. Well, look, you've covered a lot of territory very quickly there. I'm going to sort of break that down a little bit and sort of dive in a bit deeper. If we go, let's go right back to the folks who you've mentioned have come from hard-working backgrounds. How important have they been in terms of your thinking and the habits that you've applied to your property investment so far, mate?
I believe they are the reason. So without them, I don't think I'd be where I am at all. You don't sort of realise it when you're younger, but when you're growing up, your parents are 100% the biggest influence on your life, on top of your friends and all the rest of it. I believe that, obviously you go to sleep at home, you wake up at home, and you spend sort of 80% of your time with your parents. So just their mannerisms, their work ethic, the way they live below their means. You don't notice that when it's happening, but I believe when you get to a point where I am and you reflect back, it was a massive, massive impact on how I think and how I act now. Yeah,
okay. Well, in terms of that saving habit, was that one of the key things you think that you've just sort of picked up from mum and dad?
Yeah, so the saving, I'd say yes and no. The saving was mainly because I was sort of 15 years old, earning a great income. And at that age, you don't really have a great deal to spend money on. So I spent the money I could spend, and then what was left was saved, which was a large amount. I guess what they taught me, though, was work ethic. So, you can't get anywhere or have money without having the work ethic to back it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And, mate, in terms of the property sphere, were they property investors themselves or had an affinity for property? Tell us a bit about that.
So I guess that they were property investors. They weren't as deep into it as I am, but they had bought and sold a few properties through their life, and they had 2 investment properties as I was growing up. They weren't the greatest investment properties. They didn't really do anything for their financial future, but what I have to think as well is when they were doing it, there wasn't the education like we have. So they were just sort of going balls deep in the advice that they had, and it didn't turn out great, but I have a lot of respect in the fact that they had no other advice except for their sort of accountant and stuff like that, that they thought, let's try and better our financial future.
Yeah, okay. And I guess the accountant probably had the best of intentions in terms of, you know, keeping as much of their hard-earned money in their own pocket using property, but probably wasn't an expert on what type of property where that is critical to the end result, I'm guessing.
Exactly right. And I guess they weren't exposed to the education that we are in this age. I mean, sort of 20 odd years ago when they were sort of buying their first investment property, there wasn't, you know, the YouTubes, the seminars, the podcasts and all the rest of it like we have in this day and age. So I guess their accountant they trusted, and that's the advice they took.
Yeah, well, mate, I'm making an assumption here that when you bought your first property that you were still living at home. Is that correct? Yeah?
Yeah, mate, yeah, I was.
Yeah, well, and I guess the good news here is that while they hadn't had a fantastic experience themselves in investing in property, was there any friction or the discussion when you said, "Hey, I'm going to go out and buy a property," given what they'd experienced, they were still open to you doing it, mate?
Yes, they were very, very encouraging because the investment side of things they didn't do so well, but for every owner-occupier home they bought, for them to live in, they'd done exceptionally well. So every house they bought and sold to upgrade into the new one, they made a lot of money on. So they knew property worked, but I guess they just didn't get the selection down packed. Yeah,
okay. Awesome. Well, now, just sort of kicking into the old favourite expelled routine, I just want to drill in there a little bit, mate, because can you sort of give us a little bit of detail on why you were expelled, buddy?
100%. So I'm not a criminal. I'm not a kid that got in fights. I'm not a violent person. But I guess at school you have to, run to their routine. And my mindset when I was young, and it still is the same now, I don't generally like to listen to people that aren't in the position that I want to be in, or that haven't done something where I look at it and go, wow, I want to learn from that person. So I guess when it comes to teachers telling me stuff, when I was learning about history or when I was learning about, Saturn or Mars or whatever you have to learn in school, what my mindset behind that was, really, is this going to help me in the real world? Mucking around in class and talking when you shouldn't be and all the other jazz you do when you're a young kid and think, you've got a little bit of attitude and all the rest of it. Teachers didn't like it. So I think before I actually got kicked out of school, I reckon for 80% of my classes, the teacher would say, no, you're not welcome in the class, Jack, go and sit in the principal's office. So it was useless me being there anyway.
It's
quite funny though, but every teacher that did speak of me, I was a pain in the ass and I had attitude and all the rest of it, but they all had one thing in common. They said about me was whatever you do in life, you will be successful at. So I guess I could see something in me, but it just wasn't school that was meant for me.
Yeah, well, it sounds very similar to my good wife, mate, who has a very limited attention span because she picks things up so quickly that once she's got it, it's like, well, I don't need to listen to the rest of this. I might as well be doing something else. And,
exactly.
And you're sounding very similar in that respect. And unfortunately, the education system caters for the lowest common denominator. And the teachers like everyone to be sitting there fully attention, making no noise, so it makes it easier for them. But if they've got someone like yourself who's clearly very bright and picks things up fairly quickly, then unless they're engaging you and keeping you occupied, then you'll want to be somewhere else. So that makes sense, mate. So you got to the tender age of 15, and was that almost a mutual exercise? Well, there's no point me being here. I might as well be going and learning something in the real world, or did they give you a big push?
Yeah, so it was sort of a two-way street. They were sick of having to call my parents up to the office every second week. And in the same respect, my parents were sick of going up there. Like, I think it almost made mum and dad divorce, and it was tears, and it was just constant stress that was not needed because at the end of the day, regardless if I finished year 12 or not, I was never going to university. So really, it was no benefit to me. I just would have learned an extension of Pythagoras' theorem and all the rest of the rubbish you have to learn. So, I mean, it was a two-way street. They sort of said, look, we know you don't want to be here, so how about you find yourself a job? And that was the conversation.
Yeah.
So it was a very stressful time for that sort of few months. There was a lot of tension in the household, but I guess once I got out of school and Mum especially could see that I was making some money and was doing something with myself, she sort of was a bit relieved.
And you sort of jumped ship and joined your dad's construction company initially?
Yeah, well, at 15, you don't have a license and stuff like that, so I didn't really have a great deal of options. So that was sort of the only option that was there, and I thought I could go to work with Dad every day. The money was great, so I thought, why not just jump at this? And I had no idea what I wanted to do as well. Like, it was funny. You were talking before the podcast, and you said you were an architect. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be an architect. Okay. Then when I found out school wasn't for me, I just sort of thought architecture is a bit out of the picture now. And then, I wanted to be 101 things, but when I got kicked out, I didn't really have any idea at that time.
Yeah. At 15, you're still growing, and getting stuck into something pretty physical it's a good way to burn off the limitless energy that you had at the time anyway, I'd say, mate.
Exactly.
Yeah, so now you did some labouring work with your dad. What's it like working for the old man, mate? That's something that I could never do, so how did that go?
Yeah, I guess it's got advantages and disadvantages. Living together, waking up, going to work together, making Dad late because I wouldn't get out of bed and all the rest of it, so the arguments start. And then that then transfers to work, so when you get to work, there's arguments, and then obviously because your dad's the boss, you don't listen, and yeah, it was a big learning experience, but mate, I loved it. It definitely brought us closer. Obviously, when on Dad's side, when I'm your son at work, he wants to teach me a lot of things. You get a bit of golden treatment because you're the boss's son, so you got to step up and do things that you wouldn't be able to do at the age I was at. So it's definitely had its advantages, but it had its disadvantages in the fact that with the arguments and all the rest of it.
Yeah, no, awesome, mate. Right, it takes a fair bit of character to make that work. Now, you're living at home and you're making very good coin for someone who's 15. Most 15-year-olds would go and blow it, mate. They'd race out and they'd be partying with their mates, buying flashy cars, all the toys and all the rest of it. It doesn't sound like you went down that road. Why is that, mate?
No, I mean, look, I never went without. If I ever wanted something, I bought it. But, like, at 15, really, there was just nothing to buy. I mean, Mum and Dad still bought me clothes and all the rest of it. So what did I have? I could buy an Xbox, or I could, go out with my friends on a Thursday night. And most of them were still at school, so they didn't have money anyway to go and enjoy themselves. So, I mean, look, the most expensive thing I bought was obviously a car. I saved up and bought myself a car. But I guess there just really wasn't a lot to spend money on.
Yeah, okay. So talk me through the thinking and what you did that turned on the light bulb for thinking about property, mate.
So I guess the money was building up quite quickly. I purchased a car. That was a little bit of money, and then it just kept building up. And then after I purchased the car, I thought, there's no really other big ticket items that I want to purchase. And then Mum and Dad obviously encouraged me, look, you should buy a house, you're young, you get in, it's the biggest financial decision you do in your life, and you'll be done at sort of, 18 years old, and you live your life happy and dandy. So the money built up, and then obviously sitting in my bedroom, and I'm YouTubing and podcasting and property investing come up, and then I just got so engrossed in it. So it was, looking at the suburbs, looking at the lifestyle it can bring you. I guess that was probably the biggest denominator was the lifestyle it could bring, the flash cars and the holidays and the boats and all the rest of it.
Yep.
But I guess, once I sort of started searching and found that property investing could better my future, that was it for me. I just got so engrossed in it and put everything into it.
Yeah, okay. And property, you had a stronger leaning to property versus shares. I mean, most people sort of look at both at some point and then decide which way they want to go and what feels more comfortable. What was your thinking at the time, mate, around that?
Yeah, so I guess shares are quite hard to understand, especially as a young kid. It's not something you can just sort of look up online and then just clicks. It's something there's a lot of moving parts to. So I looked at it a little bit, but to be honest, I didn't really understand it.
Yeah.
So I just pushed it away. And plus, like I said, the stigma of you should buy your own home. So and that sort of lent me towards property as well.
Yeah. Tell me, what sort of coin were you stashing away every week at that time, mate? Roughly.
I'd say about probably a minimum of $1,000 a week.
Yeah, nice.
So I mean, at that age, when that sort of is at it's quite cool.
Yeah, okay. So you sort of, how old were you when you actually bought your first property? Was it 18 or 19?
18 I was, mate, yeah.
18, yep, okay. So you've been going hard for 3 years. You've probably got 150, 180 odd grand stashed away, I'm guessing, by that time based on...
Yeah, it was roughly around that, mate, yeah, about 140-ish.
Yeah, okay. And then, so you went out looking for a house. So the initial intention was something that you were going to buy as a home. Was that the thinking at the time?
So it wasn't necessarily to buy as a home, but it was to buy as an investment. But there was never the thought process of having a portfolio. It was just sort of buy this place. I'm still going to be an investment, and then one day I might move out into it or move out to wherever I want to live.
Gotcha.
But obviously, before I got to that stage, there was a lot of education around where and what I should buy. I searched out some mentors. So I had a pretty good understanding of when I had the money, where to go and who to talk to. Yeah,
great. Let's dive in there too, mate, then. So the mentor side of the equation and where you were getting information, where was that? Just talk us through that.
Yeah, so the information come from obviously YouTube, podcasts. I went to a lot of seminars. I didn't really read too many books. Obviously, I just got expelled from school. I was happy I didn't have to look up textbooks anymore. So yeah, it was mainly seminars, YouTube, podcasts and stuff like that, stuff of that nature.
Yeah.
And then, so I met a man by the name of Chris Gray. I went to his seminars, and once I heard him talk, mate, that was it. I was just hooked on him and his philosophy around property.
Yeah.
The lifestyle that it brought him. Yeah. So and then I went one step further. Chris done a charity lunch for a charity.
Yep.
So it was you bid on it and you an hour's lunch with one of the mentors. There was a few different people. So I did it and won the lunch with Chris. Had lunch with him and mate, that was it.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing it was probably lunch on a boat on the harbour somewhere, knowing Chris Gray.
It wasn't on the boat, but yeah, it was on the harbour. It was down at Woolloomooloo, mate. And obviously, growing up in Western Sydney, I wasn't familiar with the sort of lifestyle that the city siders had, and mate, it just opened up a whole other outlook on life for me.
Yeah, look, Chris Gray was a really great guest on Get Invested last year, and what I love about Chris, and I guess what Chris and I have in common, is that we both have. It's all about lifestyle at the end of the day, and lifestyle is about getting time back. And very similar and probably unusual in that we access lifestyle and invest in assets. So contrary to a lot of Australians who put all of their time and energy into buying a home that puts a dirty great noose around their neck, they and then can't do anything. Chris and I are very much on the page of the sort of rent vesting concept, where you secure assets that are growing in value, but you rent early on, and you can live in some fantastic properties at a fraction of the cost. And then you've got the time and energy to put into all those fun things. So the cars, the boats, the travel, all of those things, you can be enjoying that now rather than waiting until you're almost dead before you start living life. So was that part of the attraction for you, mate?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It was a lifestyle. It was the boats, it was the cars, it was the parties.
Yeah.
For your listeners who don't know who Chris is, once you see the lifestyle that he lives, especially as a young kid, it's very addictive.
Of course, absolutely. No, he's got the lifestyle structured extremely well. So that's really good. So let's embellish that a little bit, mate, if we can, because I'm fairly clear on what Chris's approach and strategy is. Have you adopted that strategy? And if so, can you just sort of run through what your overarching strategy is around the lifestyle and the property side, please, mate?
Yeah, so I have adopted it. I've put my own twist on it to make it work for myself. But, yeah, the basics are the same. So it's obviously buying blue chip property in, your capital cities, your Sydney, Melbourne's, close to the CBDs, where there's a lot of demand, no supply. If generally it's units in sort of Sydney and Melbourne, so there's obviously got to be some scarcity factor to them. There's got to be parking on title, all that sort of stuff. And then with the lifestyle, it's the same. So I'm a rent investor myself, but I actually live for free, so it's a pretty unique thing I do. I actually live in one of my own apartments. I've rented out a couple of the rooms and I live for free. And then the same thing, mate. I've got, a boat on the harbour that I own with another guy and a share in that. I fly first and business class for free. So we live a very similar lifestyle. I just live it on a small scale.
Love it, mate. And that's awesome, because here's the magic message for the listeners, because there is this perception that the good life has to wait, and it doesn't. You can actually be enjoying that lifestyle now and accessing that at a fraction of the cost of necessarily owning all of that. But that gives you the capacity at the same time to be investing in things that will sustain and build your lifestyle and your income long term. So you're basically having your cake and eating it too, mate, which is quite rare.
Exactly right. And I guess that the thing is, you have to live at the same time. A lot of people, want to push you just to, save, invest, and then obviously live when you retire. But there's a lot of people that don't make it to retirement. So I think it's about finding the happy medium of enjoying lifestyle, but also being quite strict on the investing side as well.
Yeah, 100%. And because you've kept your lifestyle expenses low, because this is this age-old argument between ownership and access. I mean, I have this discussion with my good wife every day. She says, I want a swimming pool. And I said, yeah, the best swimming pool is either other people's or the beach that's just down the road.
Exactly right.
And same with boats and cars and whatnot. You don't necessarily have to own them to access them. And quite often we'll go on holidays, Jack, and that's when we'll hire the Lamborghini or the Ferrari or whatnot for the weekend, because most Ferrari owners that I know, 99% of the time it's sitting on blocks in their garage because they're too scared to drive it. So if you're able to merge the two and access the lifestyle for the things that are important to you, and then free up that capacity putting into things that are building your wealth at the same time, well, you've really hit the jackpot.
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Okay, well, look, I'd be very keen if you're happy to share the way you've put your portfolio together, because I know it would be of interest to those that are either first-time investors or listeners of a similar age to you that are thinking, well, all I hear in the news is how unaffordable housing is supposedly. Talk us through, right from the get-go, how you put the deposit together. First property, second property, third property, and now looking at the fourth. Just can you put some shape and colour and some numbers around that for us?
100%, mate. So the first property was 100% savings. So that was the sort of 3.5 years of savings, 20% deposit plus stamp duty, which went into my first property, and that property I purchased for $720,000.
Yep.
And that was in 2015. So from 2015 to 2017, when I bought my second, Sydney had some great growth, especially in the area I bought. So I bought in Coogee.
Yeah.
So the 2 years later, I kept saving because that property didn't really cost me much. It didn't impact my lifestyle at all. I was still living at home with my parents, so I didn't really have any expenses.
Yeah.
So I was saving. That property gone up in value. I then refinanced that, used some of my savings, and purchased a second property, which was another property in Maroubra.
Yep.
The third property was another 18 months, 2 years later, and that was, again, Sydney's still moving quite well. I then refinanced two properties and then purchased the third.
Yeah, okay. So the Maroubra property, what sort of money did you pay for that one, buddy?
$850.
$850, yep, no worries. And the third one was in Newcastle, yeah?
The third one, was in Bar Beach, Newcastle, and I paid $665 for that.
$665. Awesome. And pretty much 80% on all of those in terms of the borrowings, or a bit of a mix?
Yeah, a little bit less now, but yeah, it's around that amount.
Yeah, okay. So, and I'm guessing one of the key things that I find that a lot of investors don't initially anticipate is the importance of having a strong income to support the ability to actually secure that sort of a size portfolio. So you started labouring, you're now a plant operator in the sort of mining game up there in Newcastle, as I understand. That's giving you a pretty strong income flow still, mate?
Exactly, yeah. And then again, my expenses, I mean, I live quite a good lifestyle, especially for my age, but my expenses are quite low. Like discretionary spending, I don't spend a lot.
Yeah,
it looks like I might spend a lot. It looks like I do live an amazing lifestyle, but I try and make everything pay for itself in a way.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So because I guess the key thing here is with each of those properties being negatively geared, because there's not tremendous depreciation claimables on those properties unless they're pretty much close to new. Then do you know roughly if we put those three properties together, how much per week they are negatively geared? Are we talking a couple of $100 each? So there's sort of $600 or $700 a weekish?
So for the three properties, it works out. Yeah, it's about $550, $600 a week for the three. So you'd say roughly about $200 each. Yeah.
Makes it. Yeah, that makes sense. So
and that's pre-tax as well.
Yes, of course. Yeah, exactly. And that's with all of your expenses out. So your council rates, your property management fees, any maintenance costs that are going into that, that's all part of that mix. Yeah, because I think that's really important for people to get their heads around, Jack, and it's something that clearly you monitor pretty closely, because the fact you can even tell me what that is a long way in front of most people I talk to, because most people, they look at the rent, they look at the mortgage, and they say, well, that's the gap. Well, yeah, that's part of it, but there's a lot more to it on top of that. And it's funding the affordability piece. I think from what I've seen with investors is one of the key pieces, because if you're going to hold on to property for 10, 15 years plus, then the cash flow becomes pretty important. And $600 for someone who's earning a good coin with low expenses per week would be quite doable. But for others who might have kids and partners and all the rest of it that attach to it, that can be challenging. So
100%.
Yeah, so I think what's smart about what you've done is you've put a very sizable deposit together. And it's not like this was done overnight. What I love about your story, Jack, is that it took you 3.5 years to put that initial deposit together. And a lot of people don't have the foresight to recognise how important that is. Because I said to someone in the press recently that we don't have an affordability crisis. We have a access crisis, because we're not teaching people to save. And if people saved and recognise that it's not something you can't put a deposit together in a couple of months, that 3.5 years I think is a pretty reasonable and quite achievable exercise, mate. What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And that's the thing. People look at me now, like I'm 22 years old, and they think, wow, how's he done it? There's got to be other factors that got him to where he is. But I look at it that I started at 15. I'm now 22, almost 23. That's sort of a 7 to 8 year journey.
Yeah.
So let's just say, for example, I started at 22 and I was having this talk with you in 8 years' time at 30. People would look at it a lot differently, because they think, oh, he's 30 years old. He's had the time to do it.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just everything's in perspective. And I also believe that the media portrays it that everyone wants to buy property. The media portrays it like everyone thinks it's unaffordable. I think a lot of people now, when they're younger, don't want to have that commitment of property.
Yeah.
I know definitely for my group of friends and a lot of people that I know, property doesn't even come into their radar because they don't want it. They want to travel and they want to have no commitments. They want to be able to get up and move now. I've got a friend at the moment who's just packed up his stuff. He's got no commitments and he's now living in Canada. So, I mean, when you have property and that commitment that you have to pay the mortgage every week, that's something you can't really do. So I guess the world's changed a lot from when, I guess, my parents were growing up, that everyone bought their own home. I guess now that people are putting lifestyle first. They might enjoy the first 10 years of their life, and then sort of from 30 onwards, they get the family and they start looking at property.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. But again, what I'm loving about your journey is that you'll put yourself in a position where you can have both, because
exactly
you're not collared with a massive home loan mortgage that means you're living on dog food and baked beans because you can't afford to go out. You've pretty much cut your own living expenses back to zero. You're horsepowering a portfolio that is growing and will sustain that lifestyle and cash flow your income at a point in time, while you continue to actually do the things that you love doing, mate. So I think this is the rarity that I love about what you're doing, is that you're running that parallel path. You've got the lifestyle happening, but you've also got the portfolio that's growing in value without impacting on your lifestyle while it does that. And that's the big anathema that you talk about. A lot of people of your vintage don't want to get into property, and I think the reason for that is they see that as a massive lifestyle inhibitor, where in fact if you flip the lid on that and don't buy the home to live in but buy the property that will fund the lifestyle, then you've got it both covered. What's your thinking on that, mate?
I guess it's the mindset though. So people don't look at it like that. People look that if they buy their house, they're going to be very restricted. So I guess when they change the mindset, then there'll be a lot more options for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely right, man. And it's, I guess, like yourself, it's immersing yourself in the information that helps you to then educate yourself so that you know enough to be able to make those decisions, where a lot of people don't take the time. And let's talk about that a bit, because you obviously spent a fair bit of time, as you say, jumping on YouTube, listening to podcasts. A lot of people don't even do that, mate. What was the interest for you to do that at that point in time?
I guess as much as it might look like it through school that I didn't love learning, I love learning about things that I'm interested in. So, when you're on YouTube or on podcasts or whatever else you get your information from, you can, whatever mode you're in or whatever feeling you have, you can learn about that. So that's what got me into the YouTube stuff. Like if I wanted to learn about boats, for example, one day I can type in boats and just spend hours and hours looking at boats. If I wanted to learn about money, I could type in investing or money management, all the rest of it. So the thing about learning when you can choose what you want to learn, it's a lot more enjoyable, I believe. And even now, like I literally I don't watch television at all. I've got a TV in my apartment that never gets turned off. It's always turned off with the PowerPoint. I'm at the gym or I'm in my car. I never listen to commercial radio. It's whenever I can listen to something, it's always a podcast that I choose, whatever mood I'm in, I choose to what I want to listen to.
Yeah, love it, mate.
So I think that's very powerful as well. When you're constantly putting positive things into your mind, I think it has a very, very powerful impact on your life.
Absolutely agree. Your mind's a garden, mate, and it's only as good as the fertiliser and the water that you put on it. So,
I love that.
It's so true, mate. And rubbish in, rubbish out. That's the key thing. And there's so many people, mate, that I'm sure you'd rub shoulders with as well, who rub their noses in the mainstream media news, which is count the killings and the misery and the mayhem. It's
exactly
not the way I would like to start the day, mate,
But I guess fear sells, doesn't it? So
it does. No, you're right, mate. You're absolutely right there, mate. Lifestyle's a really strong theme in what you're wanting to do. So let's paint that out for us if you can, mate. What is your dream lifestyle? What are you doing? Who are you doing it with? What's your perfect day? Your perfect week? Your perfect year look like, mate?
Right. So lifestyle for me at the moment, I'm living in this. Time of my life, I'm living my dream lifestyle at the moment. But I guess further down the track, my dream lifestyle would be, like, I love being on the harbour, so, being on a boat on the harbour a couple of times a week or even once a week would be an amazing thing for me. I'm not a massive traveller, but I guess when I've got the freedom to do more travel, I probably would like to travel a little bit more. And then, like you say, working with people that I want to work with every day, still constantly learning. And then I think to the day I die, I'm always going to be around property, whether it's investing, whether it's helping other people, whether it's in developing. There'll always be some aspect of my life to do with property.
Yeah, okay. Well, have you put any thought, mate, with that sort of lifestyle in mind, as to how much that lifestyle would cost you per year?
Yeah, so I guess I've got an end goal with the portfolio. I want to have an asset base of 10 million. And hypothetically, let's just say that grows at between 5 and 10% a year. It's sort of $500,000 to $1 million a year in capital growth. And that's sort of my number. Why that's my number? I don't really need $1 million a year to live on, but it's just sort of the number that I have in my mind. That when I reach that, that's when I feel like I can stop and I've hit my goal.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's an awesome segue into digging into what I call the freedom numbers, mate. So let's do that live, because it's always interesting to start to put some shape around that. So the sort of lifestyle income per year minimum that you think that we're talking about, you mentioned $1 million. Is that realistic? Or?
Yeah. So ideally, I'd like $500,000 a year. So that's tax free. So I want about $10,000 a week.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And are we talking what sort of age or how many years before, which is what I call the break-free timeline, how long before you want to be in that position?
So to hit $10,000 a week with me not doing a thing, I want to hit that by, say, 40-ish.
40-ish, and you're about 22 now?
22, yeah.
Righto, so 18 years is your break-free timeline. So I'm just doing this live as we speak. So $500,000 a year at a 5% return means that we need a nest egg of about 10 million, as you say. So that's perfect maths. 18 years is what we got to do it. What's your current investment property portfolio worth, mate? Sort of 3 millish?
Yeah, but I'm just about to put another property as a joint venture. It's going to be another sort of $1 million-ish apartment in the east.
Yep.
So that'll put the asset base to around that 4 million mark, just sub 4 million.
All right, I'm going to call it 3.5 because you're splitting that with a partner of some description. So we'll split that down the guts. And if I just use sort of 80% as a sort of leverage that and the borrowings that you've got against that portfolio as a baseline, I'm just going to plug that in, mate. So we'll whack that in. Am I fairly close to it on that assumption?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, it is. It's very close to 80.
Rightio. Okay. Well, just doing some really quick numbers here, mate, based on currently because I'm factoring the debt in, and one of the key things that we need to do here is obviously take account of the impact of debt. So let's say you've got a $3.5 million portfolio now. If it grows as it has in the average growth rate over the last 10 years, and these are ASX figures, so we take inflation out of that. That means that in 18 years' time, your portfolio will be about 9 mil. I'm assuming there'll be some super in there as well, mate, so I've factored some of that in. Once we take the debt out of the equation, in 18 years' time, you're going to be around about the 6.2 mil mark, which is going to give you about 310 grand a year on that 5%. So we're probably at this stage, and again, you've probably got another property to add to the portfolio yet, but if we look at it right here, if you stopped and did nothing differently from this property onwards, then about 310 grand is where you're looking to give you that sort of lifestyle income. It means that you're about 3.8 mil short of where you'd need to be, but that's in 18 years' time. So if I take inflation off that and cascade and trickle it back to today, that means you're about 1.5 mil short. So probably one or two properties away from being in that position, mate. So you're right on track. What that's telling me is to fund that sort of a lifestyle at $500,000 a year in 18 years' time. Today we're about 1.5 short, which is in your terms with the sort of quality blue chip properties you're buying, you're probably 2 properties more, and the job's done. Game over.
Yeah, amazing.
Does that sort of stack up in your head, mate?
It does, mate. Yes, my figures in my head have been around. I want to sort of have a 5 million-ish portfolio by 28-ish. That was my sort of number.
Yeah.
And then obviously 5 turns to 10 by sort of 35 to 38, and then a little bit more by say 40. So I had rough estimate in my head.
Yeah, well, your thinking's pretty sound, mate. Yeah, your thinking's very sound. And again, what I'm admiring about the thinking here is that you've done the thinking, because a lot of people invest in property without a real clear picture of where it's going to get them to and what does it actually mean. Your numbers are actually pretty real, mate. So take my hat off to you for having the foresight to actually think that one through. Well, one of the other questions that I like to ask around this, mate, as well is, the difference between being rich and being wealthy. And what I mean by that is that most Australians are rich. And when I say rich, a lot of us enjoy really good incomes. But if your employment was to turn off the tap today and you continue to live the way that you live, given the investments that you've got, mate, have you got a rough idea of how long you could afford to keep doing that?
Yeah, so the good thing about the industry I'm in is that every week I get a redundancy payment, which goes into an account that I can't touch until I'm made redundant or sacked.
Love it.
So there's quite a large sum in there that would nearly cash flow. It would actually to cash flow my portfolio for over a year.
Yeah.
So with me let's just say I didn't spend a cent on anything else, my property portfolio would be fine for a year just with my redundancy payment.
Yeah.
Then obviously I've got a substantial savings account and all the buffers in place for the other properties. So ideally, I wouldn't be able to upkeep the lifestyle I do now, but I'd be able to scale everything back because my lifestyle is quite scalable in the fact that if I lost my job, I'd be able to get rid of half the stuff I do quite quickly, and I'd be very comfortable for a decent amount of time.
Yeah, I love it, mate. And again, you've done the thinking, because that risk management side of the equation in terms of having the buffers and what I call the war chests in place, so that if the world came crashing down, say you're out of work or for whatever bizarre reason, suddenly your properties weren't rented for an extended period of time, which is unlikely in your location, but let's say that did happen, then you've got some pretty strong rainy day reserves there that will mean that you don't have to do anything stupid or make some short-term decisions that have long-term impacts.
Exactly.
So, again, that war chesting rainy day reserve exercise that you've built into the framework of your strategy through both what you're getting from the employment side but also what you're building up from the equity in the property is putting you in a very strong position to enjoy the journey without having that fear that at some point you might be in strife. Exactly.
Of course, there's always that thought in the back of your mind, that what if. But I mean, if you live like that, you'll always live in fear and never do anything.
Spot on.
So I guess, you just take the punt, but you take a very, what's the word I'm looking for? I've just completely lost my marbles.
That's all right, mate. That's all
calculated. A very calculated risk. That's what it is.
Well,
calculated punt. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah. Well, you hit it on the head, mate. The biggest risk for Australians is doing nothing. That's the thing that a lot of Aussies just haven't got their head around, mate. That if they think, if the hard-working Aussies of the world believe that paying off the home loan and then surviving on super is going to sustain and maintain a really good lifestyle, then they're in for a massive shock. So I often say that the worst thing you can do is nothing at all, because you're
100%.
Yeah.
And to me, that's more scary. To me, relying on superannuation, and who knows when you can access that, because that's out of your control.
Yeah.
Is going to be a retirement is a very, very scary thing. To me, I'd much rather have the risk of having a go at it and not getting it right than not having a go at all and then relying on superannuation that you don't even know when you can access it. That's a very scary thing to me.
Very scary, mate. I 100% agree with you there. Mate, we've mentioned off air, and you've mentioned on a few occasions elsewhere, that ultimately you're keen to move into the buyer's agency space. Tell us about the thinking around that. When do you think you'll do that, and why do you want to do that?
When? It's a good question. I'm not too sure. It's about the right timing and making sure that I'm leaving no opportunity on the table. Why? Is because the reason behind it is I've had a mentor and I've had guidance from someone, and it's worked. Like, I'm living proof that if you listen to people that are in the position you want to be in, and you take their advice, it can happen. So I want to be that person now that says, look, I've done it. I listened to someone that's put me here. He obviously listened to someone that's put him where he is. Now let me show you how to do it. I also believe that in that space, there's a lot of fluff around numbers, around what property you should and should not buy. And I'm a very transparent person, I like no BS type of guy I am.
Yep.
So I also want to, give sound advice that people can listen to with trust. Because I believe that I see a lot of stuff on social media, a lot of these buyers agents of where they're buying the property and how much for, and the numbers they flick off that the everyday mum and dad would look at it and go, wow, let's get involved. But I think in the next 20 years, it's going to be a different story.
Yeah. Yeah, that's spot on, mate. Spot on. Yeah, I love your thinking around that. And let's deep dive into that then, because I think this is really important, because there's people talk about the property market, and I just there isn't one, because every property in every area is different. So a market for me is where you've got things that are the same, you can compare one to the other. The beauty of property is that isn't the case. So, and I think moving forward, more so than ever, given how difficult money is to get your hands on if you're taking some of the banks, then it's what you buy and where you buy it, more particularly, that's going to impact on your ability to enjoy growth. And there'll be a lot of areas that don't get the growth. So talk us through your criteria, what you've picked up along the road so far, and what approach you have to both locations and style of properties that's influenced your investment strategy today.
Yeah, so obviously asset selection is critical. A lot of people say, look, the location does 50% of the heavy lifting. Sure, it does, but you still have to select the right asset in the right location. So if we use Bondi, for example, there's a street in Bondi called Penkinville Street. That's right at the back of Bondi. Now, a two-bedroom apartment in Penkinville Street is probably $3.5 million cheaper than a two-bedroom apartment down in Bondi Beach.
Yep.
Now, that's the same suburb, but that just shows you what asset selection is. So if you bought a two-bedroom apartment up on Penkinville Street, the same time you bought a two-bedroom apartment down closer to Bondi Beach, the outcome's hundreds of thousands of dollars difference, and the gap only gets bigger as you go further into the journey.
Yep.
So asset selection is crucial. And then you also have to put a bit of common sense into it. So there's a lot of people now buying in, regional Victoria, Southeast Queensland and stuff like that. And that's great, but you have to think that for property prices to go up, there has to be owner-occupier appeal. So there has to be your mum and dads or your young professionals who want to live there as an owner-occupier. That's what's going to put prices up. It's not going to be, investors don't push prices up, it's the owner-occupiers.
Yeah. You
then also have to think about, okay, if this person's just in a blue-collar job or, in whatever industry they're in, and then the Australia as a whole hasn't had and is not going to have, if you listen to experts, a great deal of wages growth in the coming times. And obviously to pay more for a property, you have to have a big income to get the money from the banks.
Yeah.
So I think that's, again, you have to get your asset selection and your suburb selection right, because for people to pay more for a property, they have to earn more money, which then gets them the finance to pay more for property. So, and then obviously I've got my fundamentals when I'm buying a property. So I purchased, all three of my apartments are two-bedroom apartments in blue-chip locations. They're all beachside. They've all got lock-up garages. They're all very scarce. Like my apartment in Bondi is literally on the beach. If you jumped off the balcony, you jump into the water. Like, you cannot replace that type of asset.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess there's a lot that goes into it. And the thing that annoys me is the poor mums and dads that are trying to better themselves and that have the courage to go, look, I'm going to go listen to a professional. There's a lot of people in the industry that I believe are not giving right advice, or they might think they're giving right advice, but I just don't think they're thinking into it enough.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
100% agree, mate. And I think it's, you mentioned that magic word there for me, it's scarcity, because it's scarcity of anything. If it's going to be continued scarcity, providing, as you well say, that the affordability's there, and the growing incomes are there to support people paying more for those properties, then and only then are you going to have an asset that's going to increase in value. And it's the combination of those two that you've mentioned that is the missing piece. It's really good you picked up on that point, because there's not a lot of people who recognise that for someone to pay more for an asset, the income growth has got to be there. Otherwise, it's going to cap out at some point in time. So that's absolutely essential. And if you've got that scarcity and the uniqueness about that particular asset that you're talking about, and a two-bed apartment on the beach, I mean, they're not making any more of those, mate. And if you're in the right area where they've capped height restrictions and other things that are going to prevent the market from being flooded, then suddenly you've got something that everyone wants, and everyone's going to continue to be able to pay more for, and therefore enjoy the increase in the property values long term.
Exactly.
So that's awesome, mate. That's, again, a really important recognition early in the journey, and one that some never get to. And the ones I really feel sorry for are the ones that just chase the tax advantages of property. So they're chasing how much they're going to keep if they're hard-earned, and not looking at growth as the key driver. And again, what I'm liking about your portfolio is that the yield wouldn't be fantastic, but it's not about yield yet. It's about growth for now, and then convert to cash flow at the other end of the journey when you're looking to work less and do other things.
Exactly. And I believe that property in Australia is not a cash flow asset anyway. There's a lot better ways to get cash flow outside of property.
Yep.
Because generally I believe that when you're getting a higher yielding asset, you're lacking in other parts.
Yes.
Because generally higher yield means obviously the growth has not kept up with yield, where in good quality location it's the opposite. Yield cannot keep up with the growth. Yeah,
really smart observation there, mate. Very smart observation. So, no, that's awesome, mate. Love your thinking around that, because it's, again, a rarity to talk to someone of any vintage that's worked out the importance of both growing incomes and the scarcity factor around the actual asset itself. Because I'm in South Australia, we've got a very different demographic to Sydney, obviously. And the popular properties here tend to be 3 and 4 bed homes in good locations. Apartments aren't that, and units of a similar exercise just don't have the same scarcity factor in and around Adelaide. But I can see in the sorts of locations that you're talking about, from that affordability perspective again, so you're sitting alongside probably, McMansions worth millions with an apartment that comparatively, 700,000 or 800,000 looks really cheap, but it's still a fantastic place for young professionals to reside because it's close to work and they've got the lifestyle of the beach there. Well, that's going to be a place that will rent forever.
Exactly.
So,
and that's what I mean. In every area, it's different. Obviously, in Queensland, it's different again. The land is what you want to have close to the CBD, but try and get land close to Sydney CBD, and it's near impossible and ridiculously priced. And in Melbourne, it's different again.
Yeah.
So I guess everywhere has its desired asset.
Yeah, but it's taking the time and surrounding yourself with the right people who can enable you to take on the information to know what sort of an asset's going to work best in that particular location, mate. So
exactly.
So that is the key. Okay, now something you mentioned earlier on, mate, that I wouldn't mind expanding on a little bit. You mentioned that the next property in your portfolio is going to be a JV.
It is, mate. Yes.
Tell us what that JV looks like.
So obviously, as most people know, finance now is very, very tough, but there's very, very good opportunities out there because the sentiment in the marketplace at the moment isn't that great.
Yeah.
So obviously, me being me and always wanting to move forward, I have to think of a way around of being able to get the finance, because I'm just not going to get the finance again for another $1 million property. So obviously, I've linked up with another guy who has a very, very good income but has no deposit. Now, I have equity in property and cash, so I can front the deposit. He can then bring his income to the table and get the mortgage, but then do a joint venture and split the property 50-50.
Love it.
Now, the benefit to him, obviously, is he's no cash down and gets the 50% of the property. The benefit to me is I would not get the property without his income.
Yep.
So I guess it's a win-win for both. There's obviously legalities involved and how the cash flow of the property and all that stuff works. But that's the basics of it.
Yeah, love the thinking. What about and something that again, I'm probably showing my grey hair here, Jack. But when I go into anything that's any sort of venture with someone else, I'm more interested in the exit strategy than I am the entry strategy. Because it's how you get out. Talk to us about your thinking around how that might work.
So the exit strategy, there's obviously in the contract, there's going to be, if either party wants to get out early, there's early exit fees. So if I want to get out early, I have to pay him a fee.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yep.
And then the exit strategy is, it's obviously a 7 to 10 year hold. We can then either go again together, refinance and go again together, or sell the property and split the profit.
Yep.
So they're the two sort of exit strategies. And obviously, we're both property and like-minded people. If we haven't had the growth that we expected in the 7 to 10 years, I'm sure that we can come to an agreement that how about we do another contract up and we go again. Because obviously it's not going to be worth it if the property doesn't grow in 7 to 10. You've got to pay capital gains tax and your agent, and obviously include your buying costs and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So
no, I love it, mate.
That's the nuts and bolts.
No, but you've done the thinking again. You've set a horizon on it, which at a point where you will review whether you continue or go your separate ways. So you've drawn a line in the sand as far as that goes, and then you've got some very clear exercises. If one or other needs to exit prematurely, then what that means, and that's pretty key in any whether that be a property business, you name it, mate. You've at least outlined what the prenup needs to be before you bought the property, not try and work it out at the time, which is what a lot of people end up doing. Awesome, mate.
And the finer details, obviously all being sorted at the moment, but that's sort of the nuts and bolts of how it's going to work.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I'd certainly encourage you to make sure you document that extremely well, because it's when when you're in the dating period, when you've got your rose-coloured glasses on, everything looks fantastic. That's the time to have the hard conversation and spend some time really putting some meat around that exercise, because when it comes to divorce, people look at things very differently, mate. So I can't stress strongly enough how important getting that down in paper is now, and thinking of every bad scenario that could happen, and then having a way of treating that. So you get hit by a bus, what does that mean? He's unemployed for 2 years, what does that mean? He gets married and then ends up getting divorced, what does that mean? If you weave those into the equation so that you've covered that, then you're never going to find yourself in a situation where suddenly you're either caught having to wear their expenses or be potentially in a difficult situation that could unfold the rest of the portfolio.
Right. Thank you very much for that advice. Something I'll definitely think about.
Yeah.
I think you should say that. Yeah. Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, no, okay. Feel free to talk to me about that later, mate, because I've been into similar exercises myself over the years, and early on I made a couple of mistakes, actually, and got burnt very badly, and it was the mistakes I've made are the best things that could ever happen to me, mate, because I've learnt lots from it, and if I can help others to avoid some of those, then more than happy to, mate. So,
awesome, thank you.
Brilliant, mate. Look, we've covered some awesome territory there. I love where you're heading, mate. The thing that I am interested in getting your thoughts around, and it would be something that you would be encountering, I'm sure, is that Aussies love to see people doing well, but as soon as they are doing well, they love to chop them down. The old tall poppy syndrome exercise starts to chop out.
Exactly.
I'd love you to talk about it, because there comes this sort of he's doing well, he can shout the drinks, or he can pay for dinner, or there's this sort of underlying thing. Has that affected you at all?
Yes and no. I guess I live by the thing that people want to see you do well, but never better than them. But
it's good. I like it.
I don't surround myself with people like that. I mean, I've had friends that have taken advantage of me in the past, but it's an easy thing to cut the ties and off they go.
Yeah.
So I guess it's who you surround yourself with. Tall poppy syndrome's everywhere, and everyone's always got an opinion because they're not in, they're not you, and they're not in the in the mix of it all. So, of course, everything looks fantastic from the outside and a lot better than what it is. But there's a lot of stress that goes with this stuff, and it's not easy. It might look easy from the outside, but it is stressful. But with the tall poppy syndrome, if that's around me, I just let them loose and off they go, and I just continue my life.
Yeah, smart, very smart. It's the company you keep that makes a difference.
Exactly.
And the good news is we have some choice in that. So,
and the majority of the people that are around me now are a lot more successful than I am. They're a lot older than I am. So, if anything, I should have tall poppy syndrome to them, not the other way around. So
awesome, mate. Well, and that's a very good lesson in itself. Surrounding yourself with wisdom, you can only learn from that, mate. So. Hats off to you for doing that. Mate, I'm going to flick into what we call the magic ambush round, mate, which is 5 very quick questions that I'm going to get you to tap dance to, if I can, buddy. So,
looking forward to the tap dancing.
Mate, so let's kick that off. What's your favourite quote and why?
My favourite quote is a Warren Buffett quote, where he says, someone's sitting in the shade now because they planted a tree a long time ago. I think that's a very powerful quote.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And the sort of sublines on that for me, because I'm a big Buffett fan, success takes time. And,
exactly.
You know, a tree takes 20 years to grow, mate. And if you look at just about any endeavour, whether it be nature, business, sport, investing, the real fruit happens after 15 to 20 years. So if you go in with that expectation and you embrace time as your friend rather than the enemy, then you can enjoy today knowing that things are looking after themselves. So awesome, mate. That's a cracker. Now, the next one, given what you've said about reading, this could be an interesting one, but we might put a slight different spin on it. So I normally say, what's the top book you'd recommend? But you might say, what's the top podcast you'd suggest people have a listen to?
You know what? Now I'm a bit older. I actually read quite a lot. So one of my New Year resolutions was to read a book a week, which I am succeeding at very well.
Awesome.
So my favourite book, I don't really have one, but I'm a fan of books that give you in-depth detail. So I love the books from the guys at the Property Couch.
Yep.
I love it's a very popular book, The Barefoot Investor. I love that.
Yep.
Now, these are very basic books, but they give you a game plan and they give you information that not many other books do. A lot of books have a vested interest in selling you, another one of their products or their course or something like that. Or there's not too many books out there that will give you exactly what to do in a step-by-step formation. And that's what I really like about those type of books. And then, of course, you've got your classics like your Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but I think that's a very outdated book now. Everyone knows the, buy assets and that pay for your liability sort of stigma.
Yeah, it is a classic. That was certainly the book that was a light bulb for me over 20 years ago, no question about it. Awesome, mate. Now, this one's a little bit left field, but it's a question that everyone keeps asking me every time I catch up with people, and that is, what's the top legal thing that you've done to pay less tax, mate?
Yeah, so really I do everything by the book. You get your depreciation reports done, you claim everything you possibly can. I can claim quite a few things with the job I'm in as well.
Yep.
So my car, kilometres, fuel and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But with me, tax is part of life. What do they say? There's 2 things you're guaranteed in life, to pay tax and to die. So at this stage of my life, there's not a great deal I can do to minimise tax except for the normal things. When I get into business, there's obviously a lot more options I have. But for me, I just look at tax, it's part of life.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would, absolutely. The good news is if you're paying a lot of tax, you're making a lot of money. So
exactly,
good problem to have, actually.
My fair share.
Mate, flicking back into the investment stream for a minute then, and this question's in 2 parts. So it's what's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received?
Right, so the worst, I wouldn't say just one piece, the worst investment advice I could have taken was when I was looking at purchasing my first property, and, obviously your mum and dad know and all their friends know, and everyone wants to give you advice on where to buy and what to buy and blah, blah, blah. So that was the worst advice. I never took the advice, but everyone has their opinion on where you should buy. And obviously most people want to buy what's on their doorstep and close to home. And if I would have taken that advice, I wouldn't be in the position I am now. So that's probably the worst advice I've been given or try to be given. And I guess the best advice is probably it's not how much you earn, it's what you do with your money. So to me, that resonates very well because there's a lot of people out there that earn a lot more money than what I do that have half the lifestyle I have. And you see that in life as well. There's a lot of people out there that earn even like hundreds of millions and billionaires, if you want to go that far, that just because they earn that amount of money doesn't mean they have the lifestyle of someone that earns 1/10 of that money, that doesn't have the stress and the risk and all the rest of it, but they are smart about what they do with their money and how they access things.
Yeah, mate. It's golden advice there, mate. It's not how much you earn; it's how much you spend. It's pretty simple, but so foundational to anything. And everything you've done to date, mate, is absolutely crystal clear.
And that probably comes from Chris. I'd say he lives by, obviously, it's not how much you earn; it's what you do with it. So
yeah, I love that.
That's definitely something I've learned off him.
Yeah, that's an absolute cracker, mate. Awesome. Mate, let's sort of wind it back a little bit as we come to a close because if you were to speak to someone who was, let's say they're just leaving school, let's say they've just been expelled from school, mate, to put it into your context, what would you advise them to invest their time, money and skills in to create their version of freedom, mate?
First thing to invest your money and your time in is yourself, I believe, because without education and the mindset you need, everything else isn't going to happen for you. And then I also think you need to have a really hard think about because as much as I really love in property investing, like it works amazing for me, I don't believe that everyone needs to do it at this stage in their life. I see a lot of people my age very, very happy to travel and to do not necessarily what you should do by rights. Most people you think should invest in all the rest of it, but I think if you want to travel or you want to do other things, you want to dabble in different, careers and see what works for you, that's another option.
Yep.
But I believe if investing is what you want to do, then definitely invest in yourself first. Get educated, podcast, a mentor, or not even one mentor, a lot of mentors, I think is critical. And then take the leap.
Yeah, and that last bit, mate, is something that very few people do. I see a lot of people get to the starting line and then 10 years later they're still on the starting line. So, and time, as you and I both know, is one of the most important ingredients in any investment success. So let's just finish on that question, mate. You took the leap early. What gave you the courage and the absence of fear to be able to take that massive jump?
To be completely honest, I didn't really have many other options. I mean, I'd just been expelled. Life was pretty bad. I mean, it couldn't get much worse. What was the worst? I could go bankrupt or something. So that was the thing that really pushed me. I was sort of forced to do something. And if I wouldn't have done anything, I wouldn't know what position I'd be in now. So, yeah, to me, it was more of if you don't do anything, your future's not looking too bright.
Yeah, okay. And
I guess that's another thing I believe in is...
Yeah, sorry, mate, go on, yep.
That was another quote you were saying before. I think adversity creates success. I believe in that so much. Because when you're pushed into a corner, you have to take action. You have to do something. I think if you just cruise through life and everything just is smooth, you don't really have to do anything, Yeah. So I believe if you face adversity and you push back into a corner, you have to take an option.
Love it.
And that's what I was faced with.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I guess subconsciously, wild guess on my part, but you probably had something to prove at that stage too, mate. It's like, well, yeah, I might have been expelled from school, but I'm going to show everyone that makes no difference.
110%. I had a massive chip on my shoulder.
but I've got to be upfront, mate. Most of the financially successful people I've met have done very badly at school, and that to me says more about the school system than it does about the individual.
Exactly.
No doubt about it, mate. Look, really enjoyed the chat today, mate. I think we've only just scratched the surface. What I'm keen to do, mate, with yourself in particular, given that we have sort of drilled in to some detail to your portfolio and the Freedom Forecaster, is check back in, so that, every 12 months or so, why don't we sort of check back in and see how the portfolio is going, rerun the numbers, and then it's almost a live demonstrated example of just how beneficial your style of investment is as an example to others, mate. Are you happy to do that?
Mate, I'd love nothing more. It'd be really good.
We're going to lock that in, mate. Mate, for those who would like to catch up with you and pick your brains more on your journey so far and the journey ahead, how can they do that, buddy?
Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Jack Henderson. Always happy to chat, have a beer, have a coffee, whatever tickles your fancy, mate. And I'll spill my brains, and if I can't answer any questions for you, I'll put you in contact with someone that can.
Love it. Mate, been awesome, mate. Been very generous with your time, mate. I know you will continue to do well. Now that you're reading a book a week, I'm going to send you a copy of mine and get your feedback on that one. But we will lock it in to be back on Get Invested to see how your portfolio is going in 12 months, mate. In the meantime, continue to enjoy and live large.
No, thank you very much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it.
Good on you, Jack. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Well, freedom fighters, how good was that? To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's HELLO@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/Get Invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you live forever and live as if you'll die tomorrow.